Hello everyone, today we are very excited to be at the UBC campus. As you can see, we have a different background and we're very excited to be at the Chan Center for the Performing Arts, one of the jewel for performing arts in Canada. With me, I'm very honored to be here with Dr. Patrick Carrabré or Dr. Pat Carrabré. Perhaps the person needs either a very long introduction or no introduction at all. He is currently the director for Chan Center. He was the director for School of Music for UBC as well as Brandon University. He was also the vice president for Brandon University in one point as well. He is also a two-time Juno-nominated composer. Wow, it's and much more accolade. But for me personally, he was my teacher, and yeah, I really feel, in a sense personally, I feel he is my mentor and I learn a lot from him. And so today is such a great honor I can sit with him here and talk about his life and career actually, and his music as well. Yeah, welcome to the show.
Oh, Dr. Carrabré. Nice to see you.
Yeah, nice to see you. Wow, actually, that was a long time ago. I took your class actually.
I know, it's amazing how time flies, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't think I had kid last time.
No, definitely not.
Yeah, but I still remember a lot of time at Brandon and in your class. I really feel I learned a lot actually.
Oh,
you know,
well, that's
but
good.
as well as in life too, not just about music, not just about school. You know. Now, I just want to start with this. Music is a core part of your life. How did music become the center of your life? When did you discover your strong interest in music?
Yeah, I think I was quite young. I came home one day, probably I was 6 years old, and I asked my parents for piano lessons, which came totally out of the blue for them because neither one of them played a musical instrument. We didn't even have a stereo at home. So they were quite shocked, and I'd always loved to sing and listen to music, and so I wanted to learn how to play music. And you know, you never really know where that's gonna go when you're a young person, but I became more and more interested in music as I went along, and eventually you kind of start to get to the point where you know that you need something in your life. And so even when I was probably a teenager, I just knew that I had to have music in my life as a really core part.
But what is it that music really attracts you though? Do you still remember?
That's a good question, because I mean there are different. When you're younger, in some ways, you think more about performing and being on stage. But from even when I was quite young teenager, writing music was important for me. I needed that self-expression. I often joke and say that there's music in my head and it has to come out or I'm going to have a problem. You know, so as part of my health as a person, I need to write music. I need to create.
Okay. You were equally devoted to track and field, which is a fact that I was very surprised. Though you look fit, I still remember even back when I was in school actually. Probably you're one of the fittest teachers I think back in the day. Seriously. Yeah, you were equally devoted to track and field when you were young. You were holding a record or something for?
Yeah, when I was 16 years old, I had the Canadian record for pole vault for my age.
Okay.
Which, was a bit, whatever. We had a good track and field coach and program at my high school, and I became very involved with it. So I did mostly high jumping and pole vaulting. I had a bunch of provincial records, but it was the Canadian record in pole vault that was kind of unusual.
You were a survivor for Sixties Scoop, a dark part of Canadian history. How did this part of your life affect your own identity as you're growing up?
It is really a core part of who I am. But it's one of those things that evolved over the years. So when I was young, I knew that I was adopted, but I didn't know where from. And back in those days, we're talking, I'm born in 1958. So in the 1960s, people didn't think about that kind of stuff. And in Manitoba in particular, I'm Métis. And Métis at that time were kind of hiding. They had been very persecuted before. So most of my birth family just said, no, we're French. And they didn't look indigenous. They were Métis and had been in Manitoba as Métis or Michif since the 1700s. So it was a long time. So I knew that my birth mother was French. I didn't really put together till later that probably meant I was Métis, and it wasn't until about 15 years ago or so that I actually really made that personal connection and reconnected with my birth family and all that. But as an adopted person, you can't claim the identity of your adopted parents. So my parents were mostly kind of Irish-Scottish, and I'm going like, well, I'm supposed to be kind of more French, so I don't know what that means. So I, in some ways, used music and the other things that I did to define who I was. The books I read, the philosophy I was interested in, the music I was interested, and a lot of people use music as a way of defining who their community will be. We all like English pop music, or we like jazz, or we like whatever, So for me as a composer, I often used the music that I was writing as a way of telling the world who I was. And so interestingly enough, like I began working very extensively with Indigenous musicians, 30 years ago. So even before I was really formally connected to that community, I just always felt at home there, and partly because the neighborhood I grew up with was there was a big Métis community there, and so a lot of the friends I grew up with in high school and junior high, they were Métis kids. I played hockey with them in the street, and we hung out in each other's houses, and it just felt very natural for me.
Now you grew up in Winnipeg, though. How would you describe the neighborhood that you grew up in?
Yeah, it was very working class. My dad worked for the public school division. He was a tradesman. And in our neighborhood, it would be people who worked for the city, maybe a policeman, a fireman, or people who were laborers. It was not a well-off neighborhood at all. And in fact, a lot of the experiences we had as kids, people just couldn't afford to do stuff, And it was different. Again, it was the 1960s, so people didn't have high expectations like they do now. But the school I went to, they really had to provide everything for the kids.
Wow.
So in the band program, they gave you a trombone for the year. In the track program, I didn't buy my pole vault pole, the school gave me one, and that was the way that the kids were able to be involved in a range of things. So we had really good support, I think. If you wanted to do stuff, you could get access to it, but in most cases, people didn't own their own stuff. It was borrowed from the school.
Oh, wow. But still it's provided for you. I think that is the important part.
Yeah, not like nowadays, that's not as common.
No, actually. Yeah, it's quite sometimes some stigma to this kind of thing, actually. Now, how would you describe your adopted parents?
Wow, I mean, they're two of the most generous, loving people that I've ever met in my life. They were really generous and open. So I have an older sister who is my mom's biological daughter, and then her first husband was killed in the war. So she married my dad when she was a little older, and so I have a much older sister, and I have another adopted brother. So they adopted the two boys when they got married, but our house became like the place to hang out, and like almost like the United Nations of our neighborhood. So we had friends there was a very small Caribbean black community, but a couple of those folks were my friends, and they came over, and we had, people, like I said, the Métis kids and the Cree kids all felt like they could come over to our house, and everybody was welcome. So it was a very open and generous and supportive family. And they basically, my brother and I both have, my brother is a medical doctor, and I have a PhD, and neither one of my parents really went to university.
Yeah.
So they were super supportive of education as a way of transforming your life to something better.
Wow. Okay. How would you describe yourself as a child? Let's talk about yourself a little bit. How would you describe yourself?
I was probably a big pain in the butt, you know.
For what reason?
I think for what reason? I mean, probably because I didn't fit the mold of what most of the kids in my neighborhood were like. I was very drawn to the arts very early. I read a lot. But for example, when I was like 12, I asked my parents if I could go to the art gallery every Sunday. The art gallery was free in Winnipeg on Sundays. So as a 12-year-old, they gave me money for the bus. I took the bus downtown by myself and spent the afternoon at the art gallery. What other kid who's 12 or 13 does that? You know? Yeah. But it was because I was so in love with the idea of creation, and particularly modern art. I was really interested in it. I used all of my allowance money to buy records.
Oh.
So and because I didn't have a lot of money, I would go downtown to the record store, and I got most of my records out of what was called the delete bin. So anything that didn't sell, they put in a bin, and it was like $1 a record. So instead of buying a record for $7, I bought 7 records for $1. So the fun thing about that was that you just never know what's going to be in there. It's all kinds of music from all over the world, and so it was a great introduction to things that I wouldn't have been able to access otherwise.
Wow.
So I would just I read a lot, I listened to a lot of music. I was anxious to get in the world and do stuff.
But what kind of student are you? How would you describe yourself as a student?
Well, I was a very good student, except that, again, the problem was that I was so fast at doing that work. Was not difficult for me at all. So I got into trouble already even by grade 3, because the teachers didn't know what to do with me. So I would be finished my work and I would get bored and start causing trouble, and they're going like, do it again, and everybody else is like, they're not finished, and I'm going like, can I please do something else? Let me do anything, So, and when I was in high school, the way that I managed it was that when I was 17, I played in a band in a bar all year. So I was out till like 1 a.m. every night, and then come to school in the day. And I was pretty punchy when I came tired, and they said, just like, you're doing fine, don't worry about it. Go to the library, go to the gym, do something, just get out of here. Because I didn't need to be in the classroom. I was a self-motivated learner. So I remember reading like Stravinsky's biography when I was in grade 6, because they would say like, go to the library. You're causing trouble, get out of here, So I would go to the library and find a bunch of books and just read books, So it was random, it's whatever was there, but fortunately, the library has lots of good stuff in it.
But the story of you playing in a band, it just sounds amazing. You're 17, did your parents say anything?
I have no idea why they didn't, but they let me do it. I mean, it was illegal. I was under 18.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm going into a bar every night, and some of them were not good bars. They were not nice places to be. I saw a lot of stuff that I shouldn't have seen, and had experiences that I really shouldn't have had, but I was with some older kids who were in this band, and it's not like they protected me, but you're in a group, so we didn't get into any trouble.
Okay.
But it was, again, it was like, okay, what are you going to do with a kid who needs to do something? I needed to do music, and I couldn't do it where I was. So either I was going to get into more trouble, or they let me do something like that. You know what I mean? And at least it was with a group of kids who were not young people who were not going to get in trouble.
Okay.
Or at least they didn't think we were going to get in trouble.
But no resistance at all from your parents?
No, I mean, unbelievably. I think, again, going back to this experience in like grade 3, where the poor nun who was a teacher couldn't figure out how to handle me. And I ended up in the hospital. And they thought, oh, he's losing weight, maybe sick, there's something wrong with him. And after a week in the hospital, I was totally fine.
Yeah.
And they went, well, maybe it's not that, maybe it's something else. So they did some tests. And I was testing pretty high on the kind of like, IQ and reading tests and all that kind of stuff. And they said, he probably shouldn't be in this kind of school. He needs to go into a school where there's more challenges and stuff. So I think my parents learned that I needed to do stuff, and if I didn't have a lot of stuff to do, then I was going to have a problem. And that's been the story of my life. If I don't do a lot of stuff, I'm going to have a problem.
I just want to say that. I think that's still very true at this point.
Yeah.
But how did all of this aspect of your life, being an adopted Métis and into probably a very working class neighborhood in the Prairie, and all this, and being a precocious, very, very smart children. How does it shape your worldview, if you retrospectively looking back?
Well, and again, I think the fundamental positive humanity of my adopted parents was really important, because it pushed me towards a very liberal view of the world, and a view of, and again, this is a weird neighborhood. So I was in grade 7, and one of the other young fellows in my class decided that he was going to be a communist. So he had Mao's Little Red Book, and we stood on the front steps of the school and said, people must unite, down with the, whatever. We didn't really know what we were talking about, but the idea was that people should be equal, people should have opportunities, bad people shouldn't own everything, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So I think it allowed me to be, have this vision of the world should be a better place, and I would like to be part of making it a better place.
Sounds very 60s, actually.
Yeah, and no, totally very 60s.
Sounds very 60s.
Yeah.
The world view of like, we need to fight for it, for a better place, and very optimistic.
No. Absolutely. I'm a child of those 60s for sure. And I'd like to think that I still have I'm more realistic now, more jaded after trying things and they don't always work, but I still believe in those kind of things fundamentally.
Okay. You have mentioned that, well, I guess we have talked about that you grow up in a working class, just like what I have said, which is very different than where you are now, right? Academic, Do you feel thankful for your life and upbringing?
Oh, absolutely. I often think about how fortunate I am to have had the opportunities that I've had, to have the support that I've had. I mean, and in some ways, luck is real in that, but I believe that you have to be prepared to take advantage of luck when it's available, right? So working hard, having a broad skill set, a good work ethic, and having had access to quite a wide range of intellectual things in my life and artistic things, I was ready to take advantage of those few opportunities that happen when somebody said, hey, you could do this. And I would go, yeah, I can do it. No kidding. Let me do it, as quickly as you can. And so I'm super fortunate, because it could have so easily been dead.
Yeah.
Anywhere, like if I had taken this turn instead of that turn, life is harsh, I know lots of, and I know students that I've worked with who are not with us anymore. It's such a precarious life that we live, and so I feel really, really fortunate to have had. Of all the things in my life, my adopted parents are really important, but my wife also. We're going to be married 45 years in September, and having such a wonderful, stable, supportive partner, makes so many other things possible.
Yeah. Shout out to Mary Jo.
Yeah, for sure.
Mary Jo. Yeah, definitely. Let's move on to talk about your time at university and perhaps your career further on. When you start music school, what was your expectation to be a professional musician?
Well, that's a really, and Mary Jo and I often talk about this, in that our generation never thought that far ahead.
So it's a good thing.
We were just going to go to university. You go to university, you don't know what you're going to do. Probably the most logical thing would have been to be a band teacher, or something like that. But I went in, so I played trombone, I played piano, but I really wanted to be a composer. So I had opportunities to go to Brandon as a student, as a trombone player, and then I had opportunity to go to University of Manitoba as a pianist. I picked University of Manitoba because they taught composition and Brandon didn't in those days.
Oh, wow.
So I thought I wasn't I was, grade 10 level piano, not performing beyond that. Hadn't performed a full Beethoven sonata up to that point. So when I came in, I was probably at the low end of the piano group. In fact, my piano teacher, Marek Jablonski, is a wonderful pianist. He was so confused by me. He couldn't figure out why the hell I was there, because in his mind, I couldn't play the piano, And then finally, at halfway through the first year, I said, well, I really want to be a composer. It's not like I want to be a pianist. And he was like, oh, thank God, And then he completely changed the repertoire he was giving me to things that were much more interesting for someone who wanted to learn more contemporary music, or even Baroque music that, so I was doing Scarlatti and not Bach, because it was more interesting and unusual. U of M at that time had a common first 2 years. Everyone took the same first 2 years, which included all the music ed courses and everything. So as much as people may look back on those days and say, oh, they didn't know what they were doing, they knew what they were doing. For me, it worked really well, because I had a semester on almost every instrument as part of the music ed program.
Wow.
So you play the flute, you play the clarinet, you play the double bass, you play the viola, you play the trumpet. I already played trombone, so it gave, as a composer, I had a physical connection with all of those instruments, to the point where I physically knew what it felt like to play them badly, but I physically knew how. So as a composer, when I think about a flute part or a clarinet part or a cello part, I have a physical feeling about what that is, which I think a lot of young composers don't get, because they play one instrument maybe.
Yeah, nowadays, not very often, not very common actually. At JW's Music Studio, we offer more than just music lessons. We also nurture future leaders in music education. Our Piano Teacher Apprenticeship Program is an initiative designed for advanced piano students who are ready to take the next step from student to teacher. This program provides a structured, supportive pathway into music teaching. Participants are mentored through every stage, from interview and training to guided teaching and independent lessons, all while being compensated as they grow. Whether your teen is exploring a career in teaching or simply wants to deepen their connection to music, this program offers real-world skills in a safe, encouraging environment. Contact us today at jnwmusic@yahoo.ca. But what kind of composer, your piano teacher would be giving you? And by that point, do you know much of composer was contemporary at your time?
Yeah, no. I mean, I often talk about this. There's a problem in our society in that young musicians don't really have good role models in composition. So the first time I ever saw, go take Toronto Conservatory, composers are dead. Right?
Yeah, that's true.
So the first time I saw a living composer was Sophie Carmen Eckert-Gramate, a woman from Germany or from Austria, you know, like, and I'm going like, do I want to be like that? I don't know. She looked kind of weird to me because she wore this kind of little German military outfit, you know, and I thought, okay, that's weird. But I got to university, and then my composition professor was real. He had a career. He had recordings and all that. So it took a while to kind of figure out what that meant for me, because I originally thought I'll play in a high-end rock band, and I'll write musicals or something like that. You know, back then, Jesus Christ Superstar was the big thing. You know, I'll do that. I'll do rock operas. You know, and then so when I started music school, the first year survey course gets to from the beginning of monophony to modern music in 1 year, and it's like, oh. I had no idea that Penderecki existed, you know, and in my first year, I wasn't sure I liked it. You know, I loved Debussy and you know, late Romantic, kind of early 20th century composers was the music that I thought was really cool, and it took me a couple of years. But because I'm so dogged and research and listen, and I started to find things that I liked. I remember I had a friend who was 2 years ahead of me, and he was at U of T in composition, and I sent him a letter at the end of first year. I said, I hope you're not one of those awful serial composers, right? And he wrote back to me this very nice letter that said, oh, you're just at the beginning of this exploration. Let's talk in a year or so. And sure enough, the next year I was a serial composer.
Oh, really?
Which was already gone, you know, it was a technique that had run its course, but you dig in. The value of that is that when you don't know how to do something, a system is really good to get you to write some music. And then after that, when you don't need it anymore, you can get rid of it. So that's kind of was the process for me. So I mean, you go kind of at light speed through all these things when you're young, so you just, you know, burn through various isms until you figure out who you are. Yeah. But I also often joke that classical new music is a little bit like the Borg. You know, they will absorb you and brainwash you into being what they are. And so it's taken me a long time to kind of unbrainwash myself, I think.
Yeah. But I thought at that time you pretty much have to write serialism. Like, if you're like a composer theory major in those times when you go to master or doctoral.
Yeah, no, it's. I mean, I hope that we're getting past that now, but I still notice in doctoral exams that there's an expectation that they know modernist repertoire, and that still is held up as a kind of model and a standard. Modernism is pretty fierce in terms of it's a kind of quasi-military force in music. You know, it's like, this is the right way, and if you don't do this, you're bad. You know, so I swallowed it hook, line, and sinker.
Oh,
absolutely. I mean, I went and studied at the City University of New York with Pulitzer Prize winning composer George Pearl, who's like the most academic kind of, you know, but he'd won a Pulitzer Prize. A very good composer, but it was super specific, theoretical, and quite modernist in the approach. And I was already starting to fall off that a little bit, so he would always just say, are you still using the system? And I would say, yeah, I'm using the system, you know, and he would go, okay, all right, as long as you're using the system, I'll put up with this, you know. But I was trying to write music that was a little more broadly post-tonal. And, you know, he was older, so I mean, I understand it completely, but I think that there's a kind of rigor in the theory there that it's good for your technique in the long run, but I have a hard time being too supportive of it these days. I think that's fine. Let's get past that. You should know it, but don't do it.
Yeah, in a sense, the world kind of move away from it too. Actually, I mean, like whether we like to think it or not, it is.
Well, I think
it is kind of true.
I think the thing is now the great thing about the diversity of musics that are available to us now is that you can kind of find your place in a very broad spectrum. And it used to be, I wrote a blog once that was called "I Was Taught to Hate." because you were taught to hate that music, and you hate that music. You like that music, that's no good. They're professional, they're fine, but in New York, the uptown composers didn't like the downtown composers, wouldn't talk to the midtown composers, wouldn't talk to the west side or the east side. You were one of this or that. You didn't go in the other place. They were bad people, don't go there. And they are bad people there. But that was the time when it was very popular to write an article about how horrible somebody was, and I sat through a lot of doctoral seminars where we would read the back and forth in magazines over 10 years where two composers would go, you suck, no, you suck, this is why you suck, I'm better than you, and it's kind of sad, but that was just I understand compassionately and intellectually that they were trying to justify why nobody liked what they were doing. Because it was the time of Milton Babbitt writing "Who Cares If You Listen?"
Oh yeah,
and it's like, you're too stupid to understand my music. I'm a PhD person at a university. You don't understand advanced physics, so you don't understand advanced music. So don't critique the people who are doing advanced physics, and don't critique me because you're too dumb.
One part they really hate is California, I think. At that time.
Well, it's that easy, and look, I used to, when I was, so I went from Winnipeg, I worked my way up to New York, did my doctorate there, and then it was like, I had the choice. I could have gone to California, and I thought, I can't go to California. Why? I hate those people because they don't do the things rigorously, and I used to laugh and not laugh, but my position was, even the old ladies moved as fast as I did in New York City. Everyone had to be fast. They had to work hard. They were getting to a place. Whereas in California, it's like, and same thing in Vancouver. Oh, it's really relaxed here. Nobody works very hard and blah, blah, blah. It's not really true, but there's that surface level of we're relaxed.
Understanding.
And so I don't need in fact, it's good for me to have to slow down and kind of maybe think differently about things. That's positive.
But the minimalist was there, right, at that time?
Yeah, totally. I mean, when I went to New York, Reich and Glass were doing their thing. And they were downtown, and I was uptown, midtown. We just never talked about it. You would go like, no, I ain't going down there. That's really not good down there. Don't go there.
Okay, let's move on for music, but just too fascinating of a topic. When I think of actually all these composer was your contemporary. When I think, the only one, Steve Reich's still there. I mean,
Reich and Glass are still, they're older than me
John
by a
Adams
bit, but they were, they were active. And I remember when the first time I started to hear John Adams music, because it was different than Reich and Glass.
Yes.
I was maybe 22 when I heard Einstein on the Beach. I really didn't like it.
Even nowadays, when you think of it, it is kind of out there. But anyway, let's get back to the education part first, the educational part. Now, you go all the way to finish a doctoral, though. Why you did that?
Yeah, again, I think some of it is, if you're really good at something, you tend to keep going there, right? So it turned out I was really good at University Music School. So I graduated first in my class as an undergrad, and then I went on and did a master's degree, and I was already well into research for my doctorate in my master's degree, to the point where some of the professors were kind of mad at me because they just didn't understand. They were old school professors. They thought they knew, and I'm going like, no, you're not even close to, these guys know better than you, and here's, I had, and I was really into the George Pearl stuff, and one of my professors fed because I wrote a paper on it for their class, they got the book out of the library, they tried to read it, couldn't read it, they fed it to their dog. She had to buy a new copy for the library because the dog ate it. I don't think the dog ate it. I think she was mad and said, bite this thing, But so I went to New York, and the thing is, as you became more and more feeling like you were in the right place. You know, like the things I was interested in, and it just exploded my mind. Particularly the school I went to had a really fantastic early music program in musicology. I became very interested in manuscript studies and just all, you know, music and society, music and perception, things that were really not available at more junior levels of the academy. So I just loved it. So I'm going like, hey, they're giving me money to go, I'll go. You know, so I went through with good scholarships through my whole career. So I thought, you know, I may as well. And my parents are like, you know, okay, go, you know, do it. If you can go to New York and get a doctorate, you know, neither one of them had a university degree. So, you know, they were pretty okay with that. You know, he'll do something with himself. I don't know what, but he'll do something.
But you never worry, not once.
No, I mean, you're too busy having life, you know. I think the hardest thing was when I finished my coursework and my comprehensive exams, the Canadian dollar was 65 cents US.
Oh, wow.
It was like worse than it is now almost.
Okay.
And so I went, do I stay and finish my dissertation, or do I go home, save some money, and start and try and get done? So we moved back to Canada, and and then it took a long time because life happens, because you start your life. So I had already gone home and started doing concerts, and we started a nonprofit that was going to do the concerts, and I got part-time work and commissions and all that kind of stuff. And we lived in my parents' basement for a year till we made enough money that, you know, Mary Jo was teaching piano and we were doing concerts, and I had odd jobs that I was doing that was bringing enough money that we could pay the rent. And then we moved out, and you just kind of, you're busy, you know, like I was just so busy. I was writing reviews for the newspaper. I was working a part-time job in sales. I was organizing concerts, getting grants, doing commissions. I eventually got a half-time job in an arts group that had some funding that I helped, and then we had kids, right? And it's like, okay, stupid, get a job, you know? So I had to really think, okay, what could I do that would have enough, that would actually pay enough that we could have a life, you know? And I still wasn't. I had written my dissertation. So when I did a PhD, so we do a piece and you do a theoretical thing. Okay. So I had finished the piece. The analytical part for another composer was half done. And I thought, you know, I ended up getting a job at the Manitoba Arts Council because I was really good at getting grants. And when the person left the position, they said, "You're good at getting grants. You can probably help monitor people who are getting, you know, doing the stuff." So I ended up doing that. So as a kind of bureaucrat, and you know, so we had Jillian was born, and then Ariel's born, and by then you're not even thinking about it, you know, like you're busy because I'm trying to still write commissions. I'm trying to finish my dissertation. You know, we have 2 little kids. You have a full-time job, so I was busy.
Just no time to worry. The interesting thing, though, like, so how did the first job end? So that was with the Manitoba
Arts Council. Yeah. So it was, you know, I had one of those experiences where when I had been the executive director of the Manitoba Composers Association, Bramwell Tovey got the job as conductor with the Winnipeg Symphony. Okay. And they were my client. So I had lunch with Bramwell because I wanted to talk to him about their artistic programming so I could write up a report about what they were doing. And I thought, I got to take the opportunity. I said, okay, this has nothing to do with, this is me as a composer. Here's a Walkman with a reading of my piano concerto, first movement, which had been done at Tanglewood 2 years before. And Bramwell listened to it and he said, yeah, that's pretty good. And then, you know, a little while later when they decided to do the New Music Festival, he said, well, why don't you finish your piano concerto and we'll premiere it. And when I went to my boss and said, Winnipeg Symphony wants to do this, she said, okay, well, you have to give up the file because you now have a conflict of interest because you're working with them. And I realized very quickly that I was not going to be able to stay in that job because a lot of the people who wanted me to write music for them were potentially my clients. So I and I wasn't very aggressive about trying to get out of the job, but I started thinking about what I could do. And it just so happened that Francis Chaplin, who was a professor at Brandon, had been on a jury that I had for individual artists. And we were having lunch after one of these sessions, and he said, our dean is stepping down, you should apply for the job. And I said, Francis, I'm just over 30 years old, and my doctorate is almost finished but not quite. He said, no, you'd be great for the job. Apply. And I went, well, if Francis says so, what the hell? So I put my stuff in and I got the damn job. It's one of those things where I had not had an academic appointment before. I'd done a little bit of teaching as a sessional instructor, at the University of Manitoba, but and my doctorate wasn't quite finished. It had been sitting on my advisor's desk for a full year.
Wow.
And he hadn't read it.
Wow.
Because he was semi-retired and he just, So when I got the job, I called up the head of the program and I said, I'm the dean of music now. Don't you think it would be good if somebody read my dissertation and I could defend it? So they ran around and went, okay. They got someone to read it and to take over as the advisor. And I defended, because it was done. It had been sitting there. And so I defended the first year that I was dean of music. And so it was, but it was weird because I went in and I was 10 years younger than the youngest faculty member in the School of Music. And most of them were older and had been there for 25 years. And so they weren't very inclined to give me the traditional academic appointment. So I had to get promotion and tenure and all that kind of stuff when I was dean, which was not easy. But fortunately, I was getting grants, I was getting performances, so the research side was fine. I finished my doctorate, was doing a little bit of teaching, not very much, but it was enough to get tenure and promotion to associate professor and then eventually to full professor. So I was just lucky. Again, I was lucky, totally, and it wasn't without controversy and stuff because certain faculty members think, you shouldn't be able to do that, when you're the dean, you can't do any of this stuff, and I went, okay, I'm young, I can do it,
You were age 34. Whenever I hear this story, I just think that's like you're brewing a disaster.
Definitely no question. It wasn't, and again, I'm a change maker. So when I come in, it's because I think there's a path forward that's quite different, that can really take this place to where it should be, maybe different from where it is. And those were fairly complicated financial times. There was a lot of, again, downturn in the economy. Government was saying, hey, maybe we aren't going to fund all these music schools, so it was like, okay, how can we be the best? So that we can, because Brandon had a great tradition in so many ways, and it just needed to modernize. Because like many faculties that came about in the late 60s, most of the music programs and music buildings in Canada are around centennial, 1967. The government said, baby boomers are going to go to school. We need public school teachers. We need this. We need music. We need culture. Blah blah blah. So everybody was hired at the same time. Almost none of them had doctorates from Canada. They were often foreigners or Canadians who'd gone to a foreign place and get a doctorate and come back, or even hadn't finished their doctorate, came back, and then weren't allowed to go finish their doctorate because they were teaching so much. So it was very complicated, and so as a result, a lot of programs were very uneven in terms of their modernity. A lot of faculty members had been so busy teaching, they hadn't been able to keep up with what was going on. The disciplines were changing very quickly. the kind of popular music was coming into university in some of the bigger places, and a lot of smaller places were like, no, you have to do your Bach thing, or you're no good, and it's like, oh really, okay. So I'm a disturber of the peace, and so I only stayed as dean for 3 years, but partly because we lost our vice president. So the vice president had come about the same time as me. She didn't like Brandon. She didn't like the situation. She left and got another job. And so the president came and said, hey, do you want to do this as acting? And the president was he was a business guy, and so he kind of admired my entrepreneurial side, that I was interested in music business, how to modernize things, how to change stuff. He really liked that. So him and I got along. I was acting, and then I got the job. So I did that job for about 7 years.
Oh, wow.
But it also took me away from music. The VP looks at the whole university, and in fact, he was really encouraging of me to be more attached to the government bureaucracy. He was doing fundraising and kind of policy level stuff, and they needed someone to go to Winnipeg a lot and talk to the deputy minister of this or the deputy minister of that to try and get stuff. And I was happy and I was good because I'd been a bureaucrat at the Arts Council. I could talk to them and understand what they needed. I was very plain. I would say, what do you need us to do to get this money? And they would say, this is what you need to do. I said, I'll go make it happen. And as a result, I kind of push my way around a little bit, but I think it was very beneficial for the institution.
Oh yeah, I would think so. But if you think of it, what do you think is one thing that the president saw in you, though, when he gave you the vice president job, besides all of this ability that you can get fun?
I think it was vision. Like there's a vision for the place that we were in and how it fit into the world and how we could make the most of that. Because Brandon's a small community. At that time, it was less than 50,000 people. It had a big indigenous population close. It had rural people coming in. A lot of first time. I was very proud of Brandon as the place where a lot of people graduated as the first one in their family ever to go to university, which I was too. So I thought, yes, this is really going to make a difference, and so the more we can do to kind of support this in the community, that's what we need to do. So I think as a result, the arts were able to. Music was able to make better connections across the whole community. We had good sponsorship for concerts that we were doing. People liked how weird I was, because at a certain point, Jillian was quite young, and she decided she wanted to paint my fingernails black. So I ended up with black fingernails for a couple of years, and I wore a suit to work every day. People were going like, you're in Brandon. You shouldn't be able to do that. And then my hair started going gray here. And so I started coloring my hair wacky colors. That was a little later when I was on stage a lot in Winnipeg for the New Music Festival. But people thought, it's just that quirky Carrabré guy. He's one of us, and he's all over the news, and he's on CBC, and he's doing this and that. And so they put up with it.
Okay, but just go back to the theme that you said you never planned anything. So being the vice president, you also didn't plan. It's just
had no idea. Again, at that point, I'm 36, 37, and I'm vice president of the university. I'm going to all these meetings and I'm leading union negotiations, and in a million years, I never would have thought I would do union negotiations for management. Like, my dad was a union man. I would have been the union organizer. Now I'm negotiating for the university going, Professor, we can't give you a raise this year. And it's because the board says you can't give them a raise this year because the government says don't give them any raises, whatever it is. But the thing is, again, I think, hey, I love new opportunities. Let me change it.
Yeah.
What did we do last? Let's change it. We'll do it completely differently.
Okay.
For me, that's fun.
Okay. Just to continue though, to talk about this like no plan kind of thing. Now, how did you drop this position? How did you stop becoming the vice president?
Oh, well, that's a kind of weird story. So we got a new president. My president retired, and we got a new president who was a more traditional kind of guy.
Yeah.
And he was a scientist, and he had been told that I was, causing trouble with the faculty, right? Because I'd been doing this union negotiation stuff, right? And he said to me, Carrabré, you're going to have to stop this composing stuff. I need you 100% here. And I went, oh, this isn't going to be good, because if I have music in my head and it's not coming out, then I'm going to have a problem. I'm not going to be good, And the other president had been very supportive. I had commissions and premieres in Toronto, and we would go to Toronto and talk to donors. This is an excuse to talk to donors. I was actually doing something. Yeah. I would be on CBC, and people would hear it. But when he said that, I thought, this is going to be a problem.
Yeah.
So I started looking for an exit strategy.
Yeah.
And I was very fortunate that the position of composer in residence at the Winnipeg Symphony came open. So I applied for that. I got the job. I walked in and I said, okay, I quit.
Yeah.
I'm just going to be a faculty member. I get my year leave admin, and I'll come back and teach. And so I ended up doing, and the Canada Council was supporting the composer in residence position, so it was great. I had grant money to do stuff, and so I kept my teaching full time, but it meant I drove back and forth a lot to Winnipeg. So, but again, I like to work hard, so I was totally fine with it, and I did it for 6 years. And by the time that president was ending his term, he was starting to ask me to do things, because I think he realized that he'd got not a very good read on what I was doing and why I was doing it. So he started asking me to be on committees and do stuff. And, I felt bad in the end that we hadn't been able to figure out how to communicate better. But for me, it was the best, because I got to write 3 symphonies.
Oh, wow.
Violin concerto, 2 oratorios. Like, I was busy. And I could call my shots. I could say, I want to write an oratorio, and they would say, cool. Will it be the whole concert? I said, yes, it'll be the whole, it's like, because it was the New Music Festival, and I was co-curating it, and it was great. So most composers in residence is like, can you write us a 10-minute overture?
Yeah.
And maybe do pre-concert talks. And here was, no, program this festival with international artists from all over the place and write us some pieces, And it was, again, I think some of it is you need to be prepared to make the most of these opportunities. So I had a really good grounding. I had been programming already as a kind of independent artist, running a concert series and stuff like that. So I knew the mechanisms. I'd had the Arts Council experience, so I understood budgets. I knew personnel stuff. I could contract. I felt quite confident in the role. And then the thing that I learned even more on that one was we had a Russian conductor who didn't like to talk at concerts. Yeah. So I started doing all the talking, and he didn't want to talk at any concerts. So I ended up doing not just the new music concerts, but the classical concerts, the musically speaking, the kids concerts, and all. And I'm willing to do weird stuff. So I remember doing a kids concert where I had to dress up like a fireman. I'm going like, yeah, sure, I'll dress up like a fireman, no problem, But it's because, I was enjoying myself so much that I'm what the heck, go for it. Yeah.
And that's how you get your CBC job too.
Yeah, totally, because CBC started hearing me on the radio introducing concerts that they were recording for broadcast, and they went, well, we want to make a change. We want somebody who's at that time, they developed this idea that they should have people who were credible musicians as hosts. So they hired 3 or 4, like Julie Nesralla still has her show.
Yeah.
We started at the same time. She's a fantastic singer, and she has a classical music show, you know. So mine was about new music, but it was about new music in all genres.
Yeah.
And we were well known at the New Music Festival for going across maybe experimental jazz, some Asian music, new things from other parts of the world.
Yeah.
So they felt like, okay, he could probably do it. I wasn't as experienced with new pop music, so I had a learning curve on that front. But again, I really enjoyed the music and doing the research.
Once again, you didn't plan for it.
Completely had never thought that I would end up doing something like that. Yeah, and it was a great experience. I mean, it almost killed me because I was doing 9 hours of radio a week, so 3 long shows and teaching a full load. So I would teach one day, drive to Winnipeg, do a radio show, teach, drive back, teach, record, listen to all the music for next week, write script, and do it again. So after 2 years of that, my son said to me, "Dad, you don't look so good." You know, and it's like, yeah, okay. But I didn't really have it within me because there were people who worked on the show. I didn't really have it in me to quit. Yeah. Fortunately, they made some technical changes at CBC that meant the show didn't need to happen. Okay. And so I was given the gift of not doing it. You know, I loved it. But it was much better for me to be able to compose more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This episode is brought to you by JW Music Studio. We offer piano and guitar lesson in both group and private setting. Group lesson is a great way to ignite a student's musical interest. It offers engaging activities that will reinforce specific skill sets. Ensemble playing will strengthen their rhythmic feeling and listening abilities. Most of all, they will experience the joy of making music with others. Contact us to find out our available schedule. Then how did you get this position? I mean, like the UBC School of Music and Chen Center.
I was at that stage where, you know, I probably I spent more time at the gym, like a lot of time at the gym. I was super fit. I was teaching. I was composing. Yeah. I was bored. You know, so, and Mary Jo was very busy in those years because she was running the conservatory and teaching a lot of students, and so I was wandering around going like, okay, am I ready to retire? Like that, what can I do that won't get me in trouble? You know, and funny enough, I got a call from here, from UBC, that said somebody recommended that you should apply for this job. Would you be interested? And I went, oh, that's really weird. I never thought about going back and doing that. But I put my name in, and I did. You do a couple of interviews, you do your thing, and then I didn't hear from them. Okay. It was like January. I did my interview. I didn't hear from them in the middle of the night because the time difference here is so wacky. Right. So in the middle of the night, because the dean was writing late in his night, but it's the middle of my night. And of course, I end up getting up and walking around because I'm too hyper. And so I'm checking my email, and it was in May, and it said, we want to offer you the job of director of the School of Music, and we want you to start the 1st of July. Well, it's May. Right? So I'm going, oh wow. So I thought it's a joke. Somebody's pranking me. Because it had been 3 months since I did my interview, I thought I'd given up on that one. And so the next day I told Mary Jo, and said, well, I'd be up for it, and
in 2 months.
In 2 months. So we had to sell our house, buy a house, wrap our lives up, and move out here. Wow. And so we're like, again, let's get it done. We did it. And then I came out here, and almost as soon as I got out here, the dean said, what'd you think about the Chan Center too? Because we have this vision of an academic leader for the Chan, and your experience would be great. I said sure, because I'm not thinking sounds like I love the Chan Center. It's a great place. Not really knowing what that meant.
Yeah.
And so then COVID hits.
Yeah.
And all the stuff starts to 2 or 3 really weird years. But it was very exciting because we could do digital stuff here, and because the Chan Center stage is quite big, our students could still rehearse and do stuff, whereas in Ontario they were shut down hard. And we have great faculty here. So again, not without its controversy, because my vision, I said, here's what I think we need to do.
Yeah.
And then I started doing it, and some people went, hey, we didn't think you meant what you said. You're just going to keep it the same, aren't you? I mean, no, we're going to change everything because that's the way. So anyway, it's I did my 5 years. I hope they're better off than when I came, but really excited about what I'm doing at the Chan here.
Oh, wow. And you would be in your about mid-60 by the time you take the School of Music job.
Yeah.
Right.
I was what would I be, 63 or something like that when I took on. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, but I mean that's. If you look at America, there are a lot of deans and directors older than that. Like they tend to work well into their 70s. Here it looks like 71 is a good time to retire. So that's I'm on cue. I've got 4 years left. I'll be in good shape.
Yeah. And that's the interesting thing you keep mentioning. I do go to business meeting regularly, and a lot of time I do meet people from the public sector, or from the public sector they move to the private sector, working for private company and things like that. A lot of time they say why I don't want to stay in the public sector is I cannot change anything, and all you're talking about is change.
Yeah.
So how did you do that as a leader?
Well, there's a couple things. One, I think the most important thing is that you have to understand how change happens. What are the necessary things to make a change within a large institution like this, or any institution, and then you have to try and figure out whether you can manage that change. And nothing happens quickly. You have to have a longer cycle, which is the general problem with arts administrators or academic administrators. We tend to have, I think our department heads here have 3-year contracts and directors have 5-year contracts. That's not enough time to actually make change. You need 7 or 8 years to make a change, because you have to get in, figure out what needs to be done. Then it takes a year or two to start the mechanism. Then you have to you have to argue with people and get stuff. Then you have to get the bureaucracy to happen. So, there are things that you can do that I'll use an example. When I came here, we had a problem recruiting good international master students in performance. And that's because earlier, when they had set the fees, somebody had the bright idea that music is a professional program, like economics or engineering, or law, that you get a master's degree, you'll get a better job, you'll make more money. And so they wanted to charge a premium. So I think the master's tuition was, let's say $20,000.
Okay.
But what happens in music is that if you want a good student at that level who plays the oboe, you're in competition with 5 American schools and 2 Canadian schools, and the American schools have money. They'll say, full tuition, full ride, come here. And they go, UBC, what can you get? We could give you a $5,000 scholarship. And then it's really expensive to live here, so sorry, we're sorry about that, but that's what so I looked at the process. I started having quiet meetings with the people in the bureaucracy, like higher up in the provost office and stuff like that. And I think I found a good pathway and a good argument we went, and within 2 years we were able to get the university to declare that the Master's in Performance was an academic degree, not a professional degree, which meant there was a way less tuition differential.
Yeah.
But that meant that you really have to understand who makes the change, what the argument needs to be. You need to get support from the provost and the dean and all, like that. I can do the academic support mechanism. It's harder when you need the whole faculty council to agree 100% to do anything, right? So the bureaucracy generally is there to help us, and a big institution like UBC definitely wants to help you. So understanding the bureaucracy or the processes are really important. And then, generally the literature in management is that hospitals and universities are the hardest places to make any change because the individual professor or doctor has almost complete autonomy.
Yeah.
So you have to work on things that are structural, not individual.
Yeah.
So you try and make sure that, this course that so-and-so likes isn't a requirement. It's an option.
Yeah.
And they can go teach their course, and students who want to take that course is great, but the ones who are going to have a problem with it, it shouldn't impede their progress to get what they need. So it's a bit of a little funny game that we play.
Yeah.
But I don't mind that. I've been doing it for my whole career, so I think I have a pretty good idea.
Okay, now, in your experience and opinion of all the things that you have gone through and experienced, what kind of advice you would give to someone who is looking to be a musician as a career?
Well, I mean, being a musician is, when we were young, the standing joke was like, if you can be a plumber, be a plumber. Because it's a lot easier and you'll make more money, right? So if you need to be a musician, then you need to be healthy. So you need to have good balance in your life because you need to work hard, but you need other things to balance all that so that you're healthy.
Okay.
So I think hard work is absolutely essential to any kind of musical thing, and good health.
Okay.
Because the people, we used to joke and say that, the Russian system worked, but they'd start with 10,000 and one would be at the end. And they didn't care if the other ones died or where they went, but you needed the 10,000 to make one. And that's not very good. So I think we need a better so we need a healthier process in our society so that people who want to be creative and want to be engaged in that kind of thing can be successful. But it means you need to have a diversified revenue. Generally, musicians need to have more than one source of income, which means, whatever it is for people. Some do some teaching, some performing, some do some administration, some performing, some teaching, some, do a completely not music job. They're an accountant part-time or, whatever. So it's very dependent on who you are and what you like to do.
But the balance is
the balance is really important. Yeah, absolutely.
In all areas.
In all things, because again, if you practice 8 hours a day, right, and you may not have a life. Which may mean that you don't have anything to say when you play. Because you need something, other than those, those hours. So it is about balance, and that's, again, when I look at, I don't know, use Jimmy Ennis as an example. James came from Brandon. Super successful musician who has a wife and kids and interests, and plays wonderful, a nice guy, manages all of those things, and that's a successful package because you get asked back because you're not a jerk and you play really well, and people are going like, yes, thank you very much, we'll have you back next year. And same thing as a piano teacher, right? If you're a miserable, that's horrible, but there's some kids who will respond to that, but not very many.
No.
Most of them again, it's about like they're there probably because somebody told them they had to be there, at least in a good number of them. And it's like, so what can we do that's positive? And so much about learning music is positive. You learn how to hold your body properly. You learn how to distribute your brain between your hands and your mouth and your thinking, and you learn how to work hard, and you learn how to explore and try things, and there's so many real benefits.
I just would like to wrap up this interview with a question for my wife. She was also your former student. I think she took 2 courses from you, actually. She still remember that you once said you were not just teaching your children how to play an instrument well, you were also teaching them how to live. Would you say that music education has play a significant part in your journey and where you are today? If so, how is it?
Absolutely. I still believe that. I mean, and as I said, not only do you learn some self-motivation and discipline, like you take your piano lesson, you aren't going to be very successful if you don't do some practicing. So you learn how to manage your time. You go like, I guess I better practice. I'd like to go out and play, but I need to do a little bit of work, and then I can go and play and enjoy myself. But that isn't working. If I repeat it this way or try it backwards or do whatever, you're going to learn and you're going to grow and you're going to develop. So and if you are lucky enough to play an instrument where you interact with other people, you learn how to share ideas, and like whether you're singing in a choir or playing in a band or even playing chamber music as a young pianist, 4 hands or whatever you're doing, you learn how to interact, you learn how to establish how things will get done with more than one person. There's a lot of skills that you learn about life that are very transferable. Now, yes, people can go over the deep end and practice 10 hours a day and not do anything, other than that, and they may be really good at that, but no one wants to talk to them or spend their life with them. You know what I mean? So, and for me, extremism, they're there, but they're not where you want to be as high functioning as you can be, and certainly music, intellectual stimulation, learning about things from around the world, an exploration of new things. There's so many important things for your life that you can learn from music, and think about how few kids have a mentor, an adult who will spend individual time with them every week. So you have someone you can say stuff to that you may not say to your parents or your friends, and who may not they may give you good advice. Maybe not always, but they may. Patience and to learn structure and control there are very few things that give you that. I mean, sports to a certain extent. Science camp, it's not probably as structured as music lessons, like they're out here, you can have math tutoring and science, like camps and stuff like that. So all learning is good learning, but I think music, if it's done properly, can really establish a good grounding for you that is not only technically good for you, but good for your soul. It gives you an outlook on life that is more inclusive and more open to new ideas. So it's certainly how I credit what I've been able to do. But I also chose it for my career. So
that's true.
I get that.
But anyway, whilst it's so much more thing we can talk about, and I'm just I feel really fortunate today you got to spend your time with me, and thanks so much for this opportunity and your time.
Oh, look, a real pleasure for me. I feel so lucky with the life that I've had. I'm happy to share that, and any little bits that people can get out of that, I think is I'm really lucky to be able to pass that on.
Yeah. But anyway, thanks so much, Dr. Carrabré.
Yeah, a real pleasure.
Thank you.
Yeah, great.
Wow, thanks so much.